Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So happy to be here again with you. Today is going to be great. So, good evening. Welcome to Pride TT's third week of events. It's been 3 weeks already, and we're at the end of 3 weeks. Your participation encourages us to keep up our work, which is focused on highlighting the positive contribution of LGBTQ persons in TNT's national development. Each year, Pride TC's management committee spotlights critical segments of or issues facing our LGBTQ plus family. And as such, this year's theme is Power Her, hashtag Power Her, which focuses on the struggle and yet power of a woman and their history, not history, which has helped to build our movement. We have developed and curated over 30 events aligned with this theme this year, with several community and ally partners. And today we want to take the time to thank them. So thank you, allies, and thank you, partners. And today we actually have our Close Up Film Festival, which is launching today with one of our great allies, the European Union delegation in Trinidad and Tobago. So we're going to be streaming two really great films, Her Job and Then We Danced. And right now we're getting into the discussion part of that launch. So at this time, I'm going to invite co-chair of Pride TT, Rudolph and Amji, to just give us a background on the film festival.
Hello,
Hi, Rudy.
hello. Hi,
How are
Josh.
you?
I'm great. Happy Pride.
Happy Pride. So give us a little background.
So, for those who might remember, I actually was at one time the marketing and sales manager at the film company of Trinidad and Tobago. And during that experience, I had to actually organize film festivals and work with the Trinidad and Tobago Film Festival. So when we were designing Pride TT from the very first year in 2018, film to me and others had to be incorporated. So we actually had a film night every week. So when we started this experiment, we would have a theater night, a film night, a poetry night, and that's how we started each week. And in the second year, after we had some talks with foreign missions, the Canadian High Commission actually at that time said that they would partner with us to launch the first film night for that year. And in talking with the team, we decided, well, instead of having it each week, let's curate the films and coin it as a mini film festival. And what that allowed us to do was to actually reach out to international filmmakers. It allowed us to curate discussions around the film. So it was no longer just the screening of content. It was actually everything else that goes along with a festival, getting to meet the filmmakers, interrogating the themes behind the films, and meeting some of the actors, etc. And it would also allow our Caribbean queer filmmakers to basically claim that their films were screened at a film festival. So it was no longer just a screening. So the last 2 years built upon that, and we've continued to partner with the foreign missions as we are this evening with the EU delegation. And we've been blessed to be able to screen a number of local, Caribbean, and international films. So we're hoping that next year, as we move into our 5th anniversary, that the festival will grow. We've had some engagement with foreign film festivals as well, and they are interested in partnering with us, as well as the local film festivals. So we really hope you enjoy this year's selection. And remember that by you participating, as Josh intimated, you are helping to grow this experiment and to really encourage our allies and the wider society to become more involved and to really learn that LGBTQ persons are like anyone else in society. And this is an opportunity to see ourselves on the screen and to live and observe and have other people live and observe through those films our experiences as queer persons. So thank you again, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Rudy. So, before we get into the films, since the EU, the European Union delegation, and the European Film Festival have provided the films for us, we also want to speak with the European Union delegation and get a little sense of the union's stance on LGBT issues and what activities the EU has been taking in our region around LGBT issues. So today we have with us a representative from the European Union, Mr. Olafs Arnicans, who is a political attaché at the European Union delegation in Trinidad and Tobago. Before joining the delegation nearly 2 years ago, he worked in the NGO and think tank sector in Latvia, where he's originally from. In Latvia, he also co-founded a local NGO that deals with social integration and inclusion. Olafs has a postgraduate degree in peace and conflict studies in Sweden, and he did his undergraduate studies in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And we're also going to welcome Mr. Wade Ramnarine from the Trinidad and Tobago Trans Coalition. Wade Ramnarine has been an LGBTQ plus and human rights activist for practically all his life and volunteer supporter of Pride TT since its inception, as well as a technical advisor with TNT Trans Coalition. For over 14 years, Wade acted as the UN's coordinator for public education and community outreach initiatives related to human rights in Trinidad and Tobago. And this session will be moderated by Mr. Rudolph Anamji. He is co-chair of Pride TT. Also, he has experience in the political and development sectors of Trinidad and Tobago, and he is a marketing professional. So without further ado, let me welcome Olafs, Wade, Rudy to the discussion. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm well,
Hi.
thanks.
Hi.
Hi, Olafs.
Good. Hi.
Great. So, Rudy, I'll leave it to you. Rudy on mute.
Yes, the technology. I am so happy to be spending my Friday afternoon in this way because during the pandemic, we have all become somewhat like hermits and we're working longer hours, ironically. And this is a wonderful break in that monotony to have this conversation. So, we talk a lot about rights, and perhaps it would be informative, Olafs, if we could start with you and sort of get a position, as we say in the Caribbean, from the horse's mouth, a sort of direct position as to where the EU stands on LGBTI rights. And when we say LGBTI rights, what are we really talking about?
Right. Thank you, Rudy. I'll be pretty straightforward, as straightforward as our position actually is, which is that everybody in the European Union should be safe and free to be themselves. Our social, political, and also economic strength comes from our unity in diversity. So equality and non-discrimination are our core values and fundamental rights in the EU, which is also enshrined in its treaties and in the Charter of Fundamental Rights. So equal opportunities is also one of the key pillars of the European Pillar of Social Rights. The European Commission, the Parliament, and also the Council, together with its member states, all share the responsibility to protect fundamental rights and ensure equal treatment and equality for all, which includes LGBTI rights.
So
that's as simple as it is, basically.
No, and it's when we have these conversations, especially with foreign representatives, there's always the intersectionality, of course, between our histories, our joint histories, And we in the Caribbean, we have this bittersweet relationship, if you will, because of course we are all part of one global community. But many of our former colonial masters have advanced their thinking. They have moved away from the legislative restrictions and a lot of the dogma that we sometimes still hold on to in the Caribbean. So, Wade, with that as a bit of context and given your background, I guess I would ask you to characterize the position of Trinidad and Tobago and perhaps the wider Caribbean on LGBTI rights, especially when contrasted against what Olaf just shared with us.
Right.
Well, really, thank you. Thank you for asking. I mean, it's like a day and a night sort of a contrast because I can easily see that there is almost absolute freedoms to be oneself in the European Union. And I know, of course, that there are pocket countries where there's this sort of there's this trending of reversal of rights when it comes to LGBTQ people, but there still exists a framework that affords people protection at the EU Parliament, for example. And I think that's sort of the difference between this region and a region like the European continent. There isn't any cohesive legislation, even at the level of CARICOM. And at the national level in Trinidad and Tobago, there is an absence of legislation that protects any form of the people from any form of discrimination. So it's not just based on gender identity and sexual orientation. There's an absence of any legislation that says that no one should discriminate against you for any reason whatsoever. So that sort of then reflects that if there is an absence of a culture of not wanting to create legislation to ensure that we protect ourselves from ourselves, then it begs to the point then the most vulnerable members of the community being the LGBTQ people, particularly transgender people, will not enjoy the entitlements of human rights and the recognition to be oneself.
No, I think those are some very important points. I mean, we talk about this, of course, a lot in our personal lives because these things impact us directly as compared to, let's say, the heteronormative cisgender persons in society. Just recently, for example, some of our friends required blood donations, and many of us were virtually barred from doing so because we know that the existing infrastructure and ecosystem has an ingrained discriminatory policy when it comes to especially men who have sex with men. And it's Olafs, you've been here for a while. You've enjoyed a lot of what Trinidad and Tobago has to offer, the pandemic notwithstanding. You've seen our people, our culture. You've made friends with some of us. I'm sure you might agree with me that in general, the average citizen is not necessarily a prejudiced or hateful person. But obviously there's still work to be done because I know that the EU delegation from time to time has partnered with different bodies, and part of your advocacy and your education outreach looks at some of these issues. What could you share with us and our viewership? What are some of the actions that the delegation has taken, and why do you think it's important to be doing this?
Right. Thanks. Yeah. So actually, on the actions that we do, there's kind of a whole list, and actually we're guided by kind of a comprehensive strategy or various strategies on this, to which I can get into a bit later. But on the specific actions, so we do show solidarity during Idaho Day, also now during Pride Month, through social media. We also raise the rainbow flag which is actually raised today as well at the delegation.
Yes, we saw it.
You saw, yes. Then we also do every year op-eds and local statements just to raise the topic in the public discourse. In 2019, we also participated in the march,
Yes.
the Pride March, yeah. And also, I mean, other events as well throughout the year whenever the occasion arises. And of course, then we do various human rights dialogues, discussions, and debates, such as this one, actually. So this is kind of the awareness raising or communications campaign. But at the same time, then we also fund projects through our European Instrument for Human Rights and Democracy. And in this regard, I would mention two, the most recent ones. One, which is the Sexual Culture of Justice, which is an activity-based human rights project. It is implemented by the University of West Indies Institute for Gender and Development Studies in collaboration with 6 LGBTI and feminist organizations across Trinidad and Tobago. And then the other project, which has finished, is the CIDES TT, which tackled, through a specific approach, the link between gender-based violence and LGBTI discrimination. And this approach is highlighted since it has proven to be a very innovative way to address through gender the issues of violence and the respect of human rights related specifically to sexual orientation, which is in this project, as it was shown, that the link is actually particularly important in Trinidad and Tobago. You just not have any laws that are specific to protecting LGBTI people who, in consequence, generally fear reporting to the police, for instance, incidents of domestic abuse or violence. So that's the second pillar, which is, funding of projects. Then, of course, we also work with our international partners, such as the UN and other international organizations. And of course, we also engage in political dialogue with the government here as well.
I think that, people sometimes take these things for granted. And when I say that, what I'm meaning by it is these activities have been ongoing for years. And when you live in it, it's easy to say, well, things aren't really changing. We still have these oppressive and discriminatory policies. You still read things in the newspapers. Some of your colleagues at another mission, when they raised the flag, there were some people quick to respond. But I would like to say that from our perspective, and we run studies every year, longitudinal studies, we survey our community. I would like to say publicly that when the delegation and others take these initiatives and invest your time and your expertise and your funding, they have helped to move the needle forward because they add color to the discussion. They provide third-party objective insights. And of course, they allow for access to resources that some of us would not normally have access to. So I think that we have to acknowledge that work, and there's a lot more to be done. And Wade, I would bring you in here because, based on your own experience, your current work, we know that, yes, while we are happy to have our foreign mission support the effort, there's a responsibility for us as locals, as the domestic community and allies, to do our own work. And there's been a lot of work that we read about or that is reported on. But what would you say are some of the more successful domestic initiatives that have been undertaken to really advance LGBTQI equity and protections?
Wow. So let's talk about protection first, because that's the easier one to discuss. There has been the approach of the Pride TT and other organizations who've chosen to go against the grain and essentially challenge the authorities to say, listen, we need protection. So let's engage in discussion. And I think engaging in dialogue when there is no willingness to is a good step forward. So someone has to stand up and open the door and say, let's talk. I think that's really useful for us to continue with that sort of effort. If the duty bearers of a country or region are afraid to, unwilling to, ambivalent to start a discussion, then the ones who are being marginalized also can take an initiative and say, let's talk. We're not just going to shout at you and point fingers at you at Parliament, but we're also going to talk. And I think one of the most successful things that's happened in Trinidad and Tobago is that Parliament demonstration that happens every year, turning up in front of the nation's decision-making engine to remind those 42 candidates who sit there that they have voted for and that they have a responsibility to protect every citizen is a fantastic demonstration of putting rights into practice. Because one of the important things we need to remember that our human rights exist, but if we do not claim them, then it's easy to take them away from us. I think that's a fantastic thing. And then, of course, building the visibility that we exist and building the visibility of the diversity of who LGBTQI plus people are in Trinidad and Tobago and the region is also very useful, and it's been very effective. More and more people are now having discussions that are, for want of a better word, politically correct. So you see newspapers, for example, and media houses making an extra effort now to use the right pronouns to describe us, or to use sensitive reporting when they talk about issues concerning us, and they even highlighted you in a very positive light. So good work is happening, and I think that's a really good practice, regardless of which organization is spearheading or leading it, building that very positive image coming from 14 years of public information and education. Most international organizations have a department for that because they understand the value of building an image and maintaining a positive image about oneself and strengthening relationships to do that. Your mic is off, Rudy.
I am so, and I'm listening to you, so I'm not really taking on what's going on the screen. But it's thanks for letting me know. It's interesting that, and I will say this: someone such as yourself and others, I can call a few names like Sharon Motley, Cyrus Sylvester, Eswick Patmore, Danny James. Some of you have been doing, Brandy Rodriguez, you all have been doing work for so many years. And you all are very modest about it. But the efforts that you all have been putting in for over 30 years, really, that is what allowed Pride TT and some of the more contemporary work and activists to carve out the space that we have. Because imagine if all of that hadn't been done, where we would have been starting from today. So it's important to recognize that. And I guess with that as a background, acknowledging the past, what is going on right now, how would you say we could work better as a community with foreign missions as in particular, but just generally, to really advance the discussion and to get closer to genuine change, not incremental change, but game-changing impact?
Well, so one of the things that we need to remind ourselves is the impact of our work has a lot to do with how we physically turn up in a space to be our support systems. And I know that social media is a very useful tool, but this is my personal belief that social media can only go so far. So as a community, those of us who have that freedom and who have that privilege to turn up in public spaces and represent when, of course, when it permits now. Um, we have to turn up in larger numbers. We have to show that we are a physical presence because social media, while it is very effective, very often you find policymakers don't really focus on the little numbers down there that says 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, and that little small number there itself is a numerical representation. But if 5,000 people turn up in Woodford Square, then it's a very quick reminder. It shows physically the volume of the importance of that. And I think the problem we have in the Caribbean is there is this apathy where we don't want to turn up to become that physical presence, and we should be more involved. So yes, use social media, yes, use your voice on digital presence, but turn up physically, because the most successful representations for human rights, Tiananmen Square, the um, the summer in the Middle East, and all of those other things started with discussions, but they ended with people turning up in volumes to stand for themselves and speak for themselves. So that's maybe just one. I mean, I could sit down and talk for hours about all the other things that you can do, but I don't want to do that because then I'll drift off into the technical aspects of outreach and education, and we have limited time.
So we're going to have another discussion, right? But
Yes.
Olafs, we touched on a very important point about the need for domestic people to turn up and show up, right? So I have a double-barreled question for you. One is related to that. In your own experience, even in the EU, where things are much more advanced when it comes to LGBTI rights and protections, etc., what would you say about, or how would you encourage us not to become complacent? So that's the first part of the question, the apathy that we had mentioned. And then the second part of the question is, there is, of course, this sentiment, and I referred to it earlier when I was talking about another mission raising their flag. There's this pushback that the EU delegation is interfering in local matters and you all should stay out of such things. What would be your response to that as well?
Right. Thanks. I'll start with the second one because I think that's pretty simple and from our side, very kind of an important point to make out, which is that the role of the EU is not to interfere in the affairs of Trinidad and Tobago. What we do is support the advocacy of local civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations that are seeking social change. So that's pretty much it. On the first question on how not to become complacent, I think that's a very difficult question. I think a very long debate because even in the European Union, I mean, I was looking up today some statistics, and it showed that 43% of LGBT people felt discriminated against in 2019, which is compared to only 37% in 2012. So that's an actually increase in people who have reported discrimination. So, I mean, European Union, 27 countries, and in all the countries you have different kind of both legislations, but also kind of this social kind of norms and acceptance towards LGBTI people. And whereas we see that in some countries, this acceptance, both in the society and in legislation, is improving, we also see that it's getting worse in other countries. And just recently in one member state, this has been the case. So I think from our side, is we have to keep this attention all the time, and we have to work all year round to put in place the legislation, the framework, the strategies that we have, and also to be vocal when we see instances when there is backsliding on legislation. So that, for instance, so that's why in November of 2020, actually the European Commission launched its first ever LGBTIQ equality strategy for the years 2020 to 2025, which kind of strives to build a union where diversity is celebrated as part of our collective richness. And we have these 4 pillars that we are kind of set for ourselves to tackle discrimination against LGBTI people, to ensure their safety, and to also build LGBTIQ inclusive societies. And then, of course, also lead this call for LGBTIQ equality around the world. So how not to become complacent, I think, is just to continue the conversation with everyone, and then also to keep on pushing for the legislative change and make sure that there is no backsliding on it along the way. And it's a difficult kind of hill to climb, as we see also, as I mentioned, inside the EU. But from our side, this is part of our basically what we are, what the union stands for, and we know that it's going to take time. It's going to take time, but yeah, this is what we do, in a way.
Yeah,
I think that's important of you to share the reality of it. That it's not an end goal. It's a continuous journey, right? And we're all in this together. We're all one human race, and we have to support each other. I think this has been a fantastic conversation, but I know people are excited to get to the films. But is there anything that you all would like to raise or to discuss or leave as your final comments? Maybe Wade, I can start with you.
Well, I want to say that good job to Pride TT, and good job to every single organization that's decided that we as a community are pertinent, we matter, and our rights are as valid as every other person's rights in this region. Keep up your job, even if someone does not say congratulations to you and people forget to mention you. Remember why you started your fight and continue fighting to stand up for what you believe in. And the piece of advice I'd like to continue to encourage every single organization that's part of the LGBTQ advocacy in Trinidad and Tobago and the region to stay pertinent beyond the Pride Month. As citizens of the planet, we have a responsibility to also lend our voice to climate action and climate change. There's so many global messaging that if we keep ourselves visible and wear our colors when we speak about these issues, we will build support for ourselves, because we then demonstrate to wider society that we not just care about our own selves, but we care about everyone who exists on this planet.
Yes. Olafs?
I'm very curious to ask a question. I know that we're kind of running out of time. But I mean, I'm a relative outsider, so and I'm not going to be here forever. But maybe whoever would like to respond to the question, kind of, where do you see this topic in Trinidad and Tobago advancing in the next couple of years? What do you see kind of, what do you feel that you can, achieve soon, or what do you feel will be the challenges? Of course, now we are living in this kind of era of the pandemic, which has, complicated a lot of matters. Also, just to, talk about it and to have an action. But for you, as activists in Trinidad and Tobago, how hopeful and are you hopeful for this kind of to advance and to progress?
So I'll probably take that question and actually build on what Wade advised us to do. I am quite hopeful. I am hopeful because when we looked for allies and friends, and in the second year, the trans community, the trans coalition in particular, was able to mobilize, and they are the most vulnerable and most marginalized segment. If I hate to make these comparisons, but you all will understand what I'm getting at. And for them to find the bravery to show up when others who live in much more privilege did not, that tells me that the platform we are creating and the work that we are doing is making a difference, and it is helping people to become more empowered. And when we receive feedback, Olafs, from younger people in particular, but all age groups, that because of the work that we're doing, they actually tell us we're not feeling alone as much anymore. We're not feeling to harm ourselves anymore. We are feeling that there are people who look and experience life the way we do, look like us and experience life the way we do. That to me is what makes me hopeful. When you ask me, well, what is the vision or where do we see the work going? I happen to be a very bold, idealistic individual, and people could tell me I'm a dreamer. But next year, as we move into our 5th anniversary of Pride, TT, I am telling you that I see within the next year to 3 years, significant change is going to take place in this country, in this small island, that will result in protections and more equity for our community. I mean, when someone like Wade can make a decision to open a queer gallery, a queer owned and public gallery, and other members of the community in a pandemic are using their space and coming to terms with the difference and the impact that they could make, then that's only snowballing. So I tell you, I know, but you played Carnival, so we claim you. Once you've played Carnival, you've been christened, right? So even though you're leaving us, leaving the shores of Trinidad and Tobago, I know you will keep observing what's going on here, and you will see that in your own work would have helped to build a legacy. And let's have this conversation next year again, I'm sure we can show you some fantastic change that is going to take place. So that's my idealism. So with that, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, for taking your Friday to spend with us. And on the topic of human rights, I want to remind everyone that this evening, in between our 2 films, which Josh will tell you more about, we actually have a session entitled Amor, which is dedicated to our Latinx immigrants and the Latinx immigrant queer community. It's actually going to be a language exchange, an online language exchange, where we have a member of our community who is a certified linguist and a language instructor is going to host that session to allow Spanish-speaking and English-speaking persons to create common intersectional communication opportunities, because that is the only way, to both of your points, both to Wade's and Olaf's points. We're all working in this together, and we have to be cognizant of the other people's issues, not just what is impacting us. So I'm making a plug for that. And once again, my utmost gratitude. Thank you all for sharing so openly and candidly. So Josh, back over to you. And you can tell us what else is on with the festival tonight as we launch. Now you have to unmute yourself.
Wow. Oh, wow. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much, Rudy. And thank you so much to Olafs and Wade for joining us. I want to, express Pride TC's gratitude for this really, really great panel discussion. So thank you, and we will continue to celebrate with you. Okay, so moving on to our films. Our films are coming, and today we launch with 2 films provided to us by the European Union in Trinidad and the European Film Festival. We start off with Her Job by Nicholas Labot. It's about a woman who is married with kids, and it's about her finding herself and coming into her power. She moves from a very sort of sacrificing, servile way of expressing herself to, blossoming in her freedom. And our second film is And Then We Dance by Levan Akin. It's about a dancer at the National Georgian Ensemble who finds love and arrival within his journey as a dancer. So the links are posted on our social media and our website at pridecc.com. Check it out. And we hope you enjoy the films. We hope you stay with us for the rest of the film festival. We have a short film with the U.S. Embassy tomorrow, and we have a film with the Canadian High Commission tomorrow as well. So thank you so much for joining us. Check out the films. They're really fantastic, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.